Houston Real Estate Radio starts right now.
Good afternoon and welcome to Houston Real Estate Radio, where we bring you news and information you can use on your next real estate transaction. I'm Shanna Register.
I'm James Brown.
And we have an exciting show lined up for you today. Last weekend we were down at Reliant, which was a great home and garden show for you, and got to meet some of our great followers down there. That was a lot of fun. And James and I are back to talk with you about real estate, and we've brought in Dr. Jim Gaines today from Texas A&M University. So we're going to get some information from all the way from the local perspective up to the national perspective on what's going on with the housing inventory and what's going on with the total housing market out there. Before they do that, I want to give you the call-in number. So if you have a real estate question, James and I can get that answered for you. It's 281-882-8088. You can call us anytime, 24/7. We're available. The number is 281-882-8088. Leave us your real estate question. We'll be sure to get that answered for you on the air. And you can also tweet us your questions using hashtag HRER. All right, so Dr. Jim Gaines is here. He is a research economist at the Real Estate Center at Texas A&M University and focuses on housing and land development issues. He has more than 35 years of experience in a broad array of professional activities, primarily in real estate research and education and urban economics and land development use and all kinds of things related to real estate. So we're always so glad to have you on the show. I know you've Skyped in many times, so it's exciting today because you're actually here in the studio with us.
It's a very different experience.
Well, I think that what's going on in the economy right now with the housing market is very different than what we've seen in the past. So, it's going to be really interesting to hear what you have to say about that, because I know James and I, out selling real estate, we've seen a real change in what's going on in the market since the last time we spoke.
Yes, we really have. We've seen it nationally. It's been very interesting to follow it and see what's happening. In fact, right now, some of the leading markets across the nation, statistically, in terms of rates of increase in sales and prices and other activity, are some of the same markets that were the hardest hit. The Sacramento area, the areas in Las Vegas, Phoenix, some of the other markets down in Florida, they have turned around or bottomed, however you care to look at it. And so their pace of activity and their improvement statistically is just off the chart. In fact, it'll be interesting because a lot of the Texas cities that have been leading the way for the last several years, and we were always accustomed to seeing Houston and seeing Dallas and Austin and so forth among the leaders of this or that or the other. We may or may not be there this time because the percentage changes in these other communities are going to be so high. The issue is it sustainable? We were talking about that before we got on the air, and what's fueling it, and how can it keep going, and is the momentum that's being generated, is it going to keep going? Are we creating another price bubble or housing bubble in some of these communities and so forth? And the answers are not clear. So I'm sorry to sit here and tell you, I don't have the magic answer for you. Probably the most significant development and change, and I think you'll sense it here, maybe you'll agree with me, that's happening here in Houston as well as at the national level, is in the psychology of buyers and sellers and people in the market. They're not as pessimistic.
Right.
They're not as down as they were, because from 2008 till 2012, really, almost for 5 years almost, it was almost a continuous bad news. Things are down, jobs are being lost, businesses are going out of business, foreclosures are going high, bankruptcies are up. I mean, just name it. And it was all bad news. Price of gas went, way up. And all of a sudden that whole negativism and negative attitude pervaded the marketplace, and people didn't want to buy, they didn't want to sell, couldn't buy, couldn't sell.
Underwater.
Once there was the bubble burst, and these markets particularly that had it so big, or had the big run-ups, had the just equally run-downs in terms of prices, and created millions of households who were upside down on their mortgages. Well, that eliminated a whole cadre of sellers and buyers. They couldn't do anything. if they didn't get foreclosed, I mean, if they maintained their payments and maintained their house, they were stuck wherever they were.
Right.
And in Texas and Houston, for example, there was some of that.
Yeah, it almost wasn't fair. You know, the people who could keep paying their bills but were struggling really bad just had to keep dealing with it. And those that just lost their jobs could get foreclosed on or do a short sale. So it almost wasn't fair.
Yeah, in a way, you almost wanted to get laid off, I guess, because if you were feeding a mortgage, trough there and the value was going down, if you got stuck with
You were
that.
just stuck.
And that was when we had the discussion about strategic defaults and maybe you just didn't pay the payments and so on. Now, the thing in Texas and in Houston that might have been different is you had a little bit more hope for the upside that it was going to be shorter run. And yeah, maybe the property value dipped, but hopefully it was going to come back up sooner. In some of these other markets,
we didn't see that.
That kind of hope wasn't there. So we're seeing these kinds of things going on. A lot of pent-up demand. The national market is picking up. Like I say, the home building is up across the board, across the country.
MLS sales are up.
The sales are way up, and it's a universal truism that the inventory of for sale properties, properties listed for sale through the various MLS services around the country, have not kept pace, are down. And I think that is a flow over of that negative and the inability to sell.
Well, and and you and I were talking about earlier, I have a lot of clients who are maybe not so much underwater, but they're just going to barely break even. It's just not worth selling right now if they can wait a year or two and make more money. So a lot of them are saying, I'll wait till next year. But the problem with that is...
it's an understandable
yeah, I mean, I see where they're coming from, but there are issues with that too.
Yeah, I mean, if you put yourself in that place and say, well, if I sell now, and I might like to sell now, and it's been such a struggle for the last couple of years, and I finally at least gotten to break even. Maybe I ought to unload and get out from under. On the other hand, if things really are going as well as this guy Gaines is saying they're going, why don't I hold on for a little while and I'll actually do better than break even. And so yes, there's going to be some of that, and so it's always the timing, of that. And then as you and I were discussing, and James, we were talking about it earlier. Will the demand hold up if that seller decides to wait a year or two?
And the question I had, from the research that Shannon and I have done and the interviews that we've done over the past, some of the demand is due to foreign investors, especially in Vegas, where you mentioned, and South Florida, where you mentioned. That's not happening as much in Houston. It's happening, but what happens when supply catches up to demand in a place like Houston, and then what happens when it catches up to demand in a place like South Florida or Vegas?
Yeah, and that's an excellent point and an excellent question. A lot of the demand and the reason we're having these record sales numbers, or not records, but at least the marked increase, a lot of institutional buyers, foreign buyers, investment firms that have been created to go out and buy homes and convert them to single-family rental properties, and that is especially at the middle to lower end price brackets is generally where they have focused, and they have also focused in those areas that were hardest hit because they figure they can pick up the properties at significant price reductions.
And that's what's driving the price in those markets.
Exactly.
That's not what's driving the price. It's our jobs and having jobs when no one else did, during the recession, that drove Houston's, housing market. So what happens, we didn't have builders during the recession that were building, but what happens when they start building again and that supply catches up to demand? Is this a bubble or isn't it in Houston?
In Houston, I don't think so.
Okay.
And I say it, for this reason. Our market has been tracking better with what we would call market fundamentals that you were just discussing. You were just talking about job formation, job creation, people working, people moving to the area looking for jobs and creating jobs in the process of doing that. If you look at some of these other areas that we were talking about around the country that were hard hit but now look like they're increasing, they're doing it even sometimes despite the fundamentals haven't improved that much, the employment level and income levels and other things. So that's a little bit trickier and maybe a little bit more slippery in terms of whether it's going to continue as compared to a Houston, and I'll mention the other cities here in Texas, Austin, Dallas, Fort Worth. Our fundamentals are also underlying all of this and going in the right direction. And we don't seem to be, at least it doesn't look like it right now, we're not out of bounds with those fundamentals. We haven't exceeded them so much that you would call it a bubble or a excessive.
What about some of the local hotspots? So, for example, we're real close to the Woodlands in Montgomery County,
Right.
and there are some some lots up there that are going for a lot of money right now. I sold a house to some clients not very long ago, and now that lot across the street from them is just about doubled, and they're thinking, should we sell our house? How long is that going to be sustainable? I mean, it can't last forever. Are these prices going to continue to rise and stabilize, or is this temporary?
That's a good question. How if you were going up 10% a year, can you go up 10% a year every year for the next 20 years? Probably not. It doesn't work. Even in the best of times, back in 04, 5, 6, and 7.
Well, and I feel
Couldn't do
like
it.
once these builders are able to get more houses on the ground, the demand is not going to be so heavy right there in the Woodlands where they're trying to finish out, and those prices are going to stabilize.
I think you're right. I think in the long run, supply and demand always stabilize and come together, because if the demand goes up, people will start supplying whatever it is,
Eventually,
lots and
they're gonna catch up
inventory
to it.
and houses. Right now, we know good and well that for the last several years, it's been so difficult to develop land and build new lots, just the lot, getting the
Right.
site preparation and so forth. Forget building the house, just getting the lot together. And we're looking at, we talked about it earlier, in the Houston area, the effective lot inventory is probably less than 2 years. And I say effective inventory, the lots located where people are looking
Want
to
to
buy
live.
and want to
Right.
be and so on. There's probably a lot of lots that were platted and so forth,
Nobody wants
some years
them.
ago, but
Less
they're
desirable
a
areas.
little less desirable. Now, over time, those sometimes become desirable areas.
Right.
So
Very true.
the market can catch up with it. If somebody got too far out ahead or too far out, it'll catch up. But for the short run, we've got this imbalance here going on, that we have strong demand that's been created by population growth, by business growth, by employment growth, by income growth in the Houston metro area, creating good demand, good solid demand based on fundamentals, more or less. And psychology and the desire that now I want to buy a house because I think if I buy it today, it's going to
Right.
go up in
Right.
price.
Right.
In the short run, those percentage increases will probably be pretty good. This year, 2013, 2014 will probably be a pretty good year too. Now I'm assuming no big thing happens,
Right.
like the oil market doesn't collapse, or the
government doesn't get too involved.
If we survive all of the other things that happen or potentially could happen, but assuming that those things don't happen, or at least they get balanced out. So I think, and you were probably right, that for the next year or two, maybe even 3, there's going to be that relatively short-term period where we're going to have that imbalance between demand and supply. But you are correct. You talk to any of the home builders now, and they're out. They're active. They're moving as fast as
Yes,
they can,
they
as
are.
aggressive as they can. They're only limited by resources.
Right.
Cost of product, material costs have gone up, lumber, cement, etc. Labor. I have been told that they are still having some trouble finding construction labor
shortages.
to come in, and then that lot inventory, and that's somewhat of a financing. We got lots of land, and we have really the ability to do it, but the financing hasn't caught up yet with the realities of the market, or the market hadn't caught up with the realities of financing, whichever way you care to look at that. And so it'll take, and even at that, it takes a year, roughly, to buy a piece of raw dirt and develop it and get the site prep and all of that. So it'll take a little bit of time, but I think that will come back up and start balancing itself. We're seeing it inside the loop. You're seeing it inside. Inside the loop, it's just hot as a firecracker.
Yeah. Let's talk about that. We've got to go to a quick commercial break, and then we'll come back and let's talk about how Houston's doing as a whole, because we've got some great hot pockets around Houston.
Oh, yeah.